the equalisation of the state pension age on women. To move the motion, I call Mhairi Black.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I beg to move the motion as drafted on the order paper. And I want to thank the Backbench Committee for giving us the time to debate this important issue. But I especially want to take a moment to thank the WASPI team, that is the Women Against Pension Inequality. Now, pensions are incredibly complicated, as I know most people will imagine. But these women, these ordinary women, have managed to take the time to sift through all of this information, and they have came up and drafted one of the most comprehensive and articulate briefings that I have seen since I was elected. So I want to thank them especially for articulating their arguments so well. And it's precisely because pensions are so complicated that I think it's important. Already, yes, on you go.
The honourable member is making a very important starting statement, given that the Pensions Minister has admitted that he made a bad decision based on inadequate briefing. A former Pensions Minister, sorry. Is it not therefore only right that the House considers this decision today and takes it seriously in terms of making an absolute right decision with the right information before it?
With the honourable member, I think that's why this debate is so important, and we should be calling on the government to act. But I think because pensions are so complicated, it's very important, not just for the benefit of some members or people in the gallery or people who are watching at home. I think it's important to try and explain why these women have found themselves in the position they have done. And to do so, we have to go back to 1995, when the Pension Act increased the female state pension age from 60 to 65. Now, the purpose of this was to equalise the pension age so that women were retiring at the same age as men. That's fair enough, that makes sense. I don't think there's anybody who would disagree with that principle. The Turner Commission recommended that 15 years' notice should be given to individuals if their pension arrangements are going to change, in order to give them adequate time to respond appropriately. The 1995 Act technically did do that. The equalisation, the changes were not to be brought in until 2010. That did technically give women 15 years' notice. But the problem is, nobody knew about this. The reality is that less than half of women knew that this would affect them as late as 2008. The National Centre for Social Research stated that in 2011, only 43% of women were aware of the planned change. Not a single... Yes, on you go.
Lady for giving way, and she makes an important point about people not being aware. It would seem that the government front bench is not aware. There isn't an Equalities Minister here, there isn't a DWP Minister here. This is a great matter of concern. You're not in the DWP.
Yes, no, I think it is noticeable that it is a pity how few Conservatives have turned out. But I think it's important to highlight that not a single letter was sent out by the government to women. There was no official correspondence between the government and the individuals affected, alerting them as to the changes that were going to happen to them. Even the previous Pensions Minister, Steve Webb, said that he recognised that not everybody knew that the changes had happened in the 95 Act. A Freedom of Information Act states that the Department did eventually write to individuals affected, and states mail campaigns took place between 2009 and 2013. This is 14 years after the implementation of the 1995 Act.
Shameful.
Women were not personally notified by anybody official until 14 years after the changes came in. That's 14 years less these women have to prepare and to try and make some alternative arrangements. Yes.
Give way, Mhairi.
She's making a very important point. But isn't the injustice to this set of women this in a nutshell? That they've not just had one change to the state pension age, they've had two. That process has been accelerated and that there is no transitional arrangements in place. Isn't that the real unfairness here?
The points that the honourable member has raised. To go back to the correspondence between the government, even... on you go.
Do be giving way, because I've a great deal of sympathy with what she's saying. And would she accept, I'm glad she accepts, that the need for equalisation is generally accepted and is right and proper. Would she perhaps consider that it would be sensible to urge the government to look at the sort of transitional arrangements that were made with public sector pensions reform, where there were some 10 to 15-year arrangements? And would that perhaps be a constructive way forward?
As I said at the beginning, I don't think there's anybody in here who has a problem with the principle of transitioning towards equality. I don't think anybody does recognise that. But in this instance, we're talking about women's pensions, so I think it's important to bring it back to that. And the fact of the matter is, multiple constituents who have written to me have actually said that from the letters that they did receive, the information was actually conflicting. They were getting different information. In one case, a constituent of mine had been told that they had enough contributions to receive their full state pension at 60, which was only a few months away, only to receive a further letter 3 weeks later telling her that in actual fact she's not getting her pension until she's nearly 66. Many of the letters didn't even reach the people they were supposed to. Some were told by MPs and by ministers that they must have given the DWP the wrong addresses. But the reality is that these are women who've been living in the same house for multiple years. They've been staying there. I want to make some progress. They've been living in houses for over 20 years. So I find that really difficult to believe. Now, some people say you shouldn't have to be written to. It's your pension. You should be keeping an eye on it. You should be looking out for reports and things. Take responsibility. But when giving evidence to the Work and Pensions Committee, financial journalist Paul Lewis told us that after researching this himself, he could barely find any reporting of the issue at all in 1995. There were very few small press cuttings in the business pages at the back of some newspapers. Another Freedom of Information Act states that the government did fund, and I quote, broader awareness campaigns which ran in waves between 2001 and 2004. I'm going to make some progress. These campaigns, and again I quote, did not focus on equalisation in particular. In fact, one of the press adverts in these campaigns were focused on this issue. One press cutting roughly 7 years after it's already been passed into law. The whole thing clearly became a total mess. That's quite evident. And I don't know whether it wasn't reported deliberately for political reasons or fear of ramification. I don't know whether it was a genuine accident. I don't know. But what I do know is women were not notified. It wasn't reported, and they weren't given enough time to be able to make the appropriate arrangements. That then brings us on to the Pension Act in 2007. And it increased the equalised SPA from 65 to 66 between 2024 and 26, and it gave all affected people effectively 17 years' notice. That's fair enough. But then we come on to what my colleague has mentioned, the Pensions Act 2011. And it came along and it said, forget the 17 years' notice, we're going to rush this through. We need to do this right now. So the 2011 Act accelerated pension age equalisation for women, and the subsequent increase to 66, effective from October 2016 onwards, meaning that affected women had only 5 years' notice to try and remedy life plans that had been in place for years. Well, yes, lovely.
She's making an excellent speech, and I welcome this debate that she's brought to the House. Would you agree with me that many of these women have a lifetime of low pay and unequal pay to men, low paid jobs, and even lower than they should get versus the men? They've had broken careers because they've brought up children, and then they may have even separated and got divorced, and their whole life plan has been disrupted and destroyed and impoverished by this awful change that she's taken.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with what the Honourable Member said, and it's something I'm going to touch on later on. But referring back to the 2011 Act, it made women have to wait an extra year to a year and a half to claim their state pension. However, we have to remember and take it in the context that women didn't know about the initial 1995 Act. So we've got a situation where there's a whole host of women who read about the 2011 Act and went, oh God, right, okay, I'm going to have to be working an extra 2 years, I better start making plans. Oh no, wait a minute, I'm working till I'm 66. Where did that come from? So there's a whole host of women who've been given a double whammy, if you like. The government has not and is not giving women enough time to prepare alternative plans. There has to be better transitional arrangements here. The Conservative ethos is to encourage independence and responsible choice. But how can that happen if you don't give people the time to make the responsible choices? By continuing this policy... Oh, sorry. Hold on a second. I know I'm right. By continuing this at such a high speed, the government is knowingly and deliberately placing another burden on women who are already trying to deal with the consequences of an act passed 21 years ago that they've only found out about now. And to put that into context, I'm 21. That's how old this is. One of my constituents... One of my constituents told me that she began working at 17 and she chose to pay the full rate of national insurance on the basis that she would retire at 60. Other options were available to her, but she said, I want to retire at 60, so I'll pay the price through national insurance up until my whole working life. She put it in a way that I think is very good and accurate to describe what's happening, because she's now found out she's not retiring until she's 66. She says, the Coalition and this present government have stripped us of our pensions with no prior warning and with no regard to the contract we all entered when we were 17. Now, she uses the term contract, and that's an important point, because pensions are not benefits, they are a contract. People enter into them on the basis that if I pay X amount of national insurance, I will receive Y at this age. Yes, I'll give way to the...
Thank you. Is this not the same as the case of my constituent, who at 57 and a half realised that she would no longer be able to retire at 60, and she's a care worker doing an extremely physically demanding job, and has now got to work till 66. She has low income throughout her life, worked as a care worker, and now has to carry on doing this demanding job for a further 6 years.
Yes, I think that every member in here, if they got in contact with their constituents, recognises that this is a problem that spreads across the whole of the UK and affects women of all classes, different backgrounds, jobs and all sorts. I'm going to make some progress through this. In criminal law, if we want to send a prisoner to jail, it has to be agreed beforehand how long that person's going away for. And if that changes, there are appropriate measures to deal with that. In civil law, if we enter into a contract, there are terms and conditions which say if you want to change this contract and if you want to break out of it, there will be a price to pay. Why are pensions any different? This is a contract that people have entered into, and it's now being broken, and there's nothing that is being done to try and allow them the transition. These women have done exactly what was asked of them. They have worked hard all their lives, they've paid their national insurance to have it taken away from behind their backs. And what's worse about this, if the government chooses to continue with this policy, it's that it completely ignores the years of gender inequality that these women have lived through. Another constituent of mine, Kathleen Burney, explains that she worked until her children came along. Her husband could no longer work due to disability. She was determined not to depend on state benefits, so she studied, she became a primary school teacher, she cared for her husband and her children, and she never claimed a penny, and she has based all her life plans and her financial plans around the age that she will be retiring, which she knew was 60. She's now found out that she can't retire until she's 66. Unpaid carers are the unsung heroes of our economy. They have saved consecutive governments an absolute fortune, time and time again. And sadly, we come from a society whereby women have had to live with years of performing gender roles, which means that sadly the vast majority of unpaid carers are women, and that's the type of people that this policy is hitting. It's hitting people who can't afford to go 6 years without any kind of pension. Now, some women like Kathleen are literally being left penniless. They have absolutely nothing and are being forced to turn to the state for benefits. How does that fit into the logic of reducing public spending? We will most likely hear the government say that it's all okay because women will do better under the new single-tier state pension. But we have the existence of a campaign called CARISP, and I hope I've pronounced that right. It's a collection against real inequality and justice of the state pension. And this is a collection of women who are quite rightly pointing out that there's another issue on top of this, which is that you only receive the higher rate of the new pension if you have paid 35 years of national insurance. Many women haven't had the chance to build up that level. It's a separate issue, but I mention it firstly to raise awareness and secondly in the hope that it will earn a debate on its own merits. But to get back to the initial point, the government has said that the policy decision to increase women's state pension age is designed to remove the inequality between men and women. That's a strange definition of equality, if whereby I'm being shafted and shortchanged purely for the fact of when I'm born and the fact that I'm a woman. That's not my definition of equality. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, there are two problems at the heart of this. Firstly is the poor communication that has happened throughout the years, and all we can do is learn from that. I accept the 95 Act has happened, and the mistakes that were made, all we can do is reflect on them and make sure they're not repeated again. But the second issue is the 2011 Act, the rapid changes that the Coalition and this government have made. That's something we can do something about. Unlike most things that come from this government, and I mean this sincerely, I don't believe that this policy is vindictive. I don't believe that it's done in the knowledge that it would hurt people. I genuinely think that we've ended up in this situation purely because of a mess, because of mistake after mistake, and we've found ourselves in this position. Any mess can be cleared up, however. If this policy does continue in the full knowledge of everything that has been outlined and will be outlined, then it will become vindictive, it will become deliberate, and it will be done in full knowledge that people will be hurt. Now, I understand that we have to work in tandem and work with responsibility when it comes to the economy, but not by punishing people who are about to retire. Every topic we speak about in this chamber comes down to where are you going to find the money, and I understand that. And the answer that's always given is austerity, no matter how brutal and no matter who it affects. In this chamber, since I was elected, we've had a go at the people on low wages, we've had a go at the disabled, we've had a go at women, now we're having a go at pensioners. We can afford to send airstrikes into Syria, we can afford to pay for nuclear weapons, but we can't afford to look after our pensioners. I just don't buy it. Women who are sitting up in that gallery right now, they did not cause the financial crash. They did not cause the state our economy is in, and they did not make the irresponsible decisions that have got us here. I fully understand the question, where are you going to find the money? But I refuse to accept or believe that it's got to come out of the pensions of older women.